Welcome to the Seattle Investors Club podcast with Julie Clark and Joe Bauer, where we share the nuts and bolts of real estate investing from our 20-plus years in the industry. Sit back, relax, listen, and immediately take action. Are you ready? Here we go.
Welcome to the Nuts and Bolts of Real Estate Investing podcast. My name is Joe Bauer, and I'm here with my co-host, Julie Clark. Julie, how you doing today?
All good, Joe. Let's be funny and tell everybody this is round 2 of us attempting to record this podcast today, because while I am sitting here in beautiful Seattle looking out at the Olympic Mountains here from my house, you are up in Telluride, Colorado, having fun like you normally do. And we kind of lost you there for a minute. So we're going to jump back into it today. And tell us again where you're at. If you guys who are listening have not, you've probably listened to a few of our podcasts, you know that Joe is living the life that many of you probably want to live, which is full-time on the road, just having adventures, biking, hiking, snowboarding, camping, all that stuff. And I know there's a lot of you out there that are super interested in that, as well as fitness, which is Joe's passion. So rather than talk about anything else this morning, Joe, I want to give you some props and tell everybody where they can follow you. Aside from talking about all this real estate stuff all the time, how can people get healthy by connecting with you?
Yeah, you guys should definitely follow us at The Fantastic Life on Instagram or Facebook, because we've been doing crazy stuff like mountain biking through Telluride. We camped in a ghost town the other night, which we have pictures of on our Instagram. And it's just been craziness. So highly recommend that if you have any passion for travel, check us out at The Fantastic Life. And if you have any passion for at-home fitness, hit me up personally.
Awesome. Good stuff, right? Some crazy business. Joe is living a really good lifestyle here. But I'll tell you who else is living a good lifestyle. It is our guest today, Mr. Dion McNeeley, who is a rental property investor from Tacoma, Washington. That's going to be joining us today. Dion has 11 doors that he's acquired through house hacking small multifamily. And we are going to get the nuts and bolts of his story today, because I think his story will resonate and be something that many, many of you can identify with as you are getting started or thinking about getting started, or maybe you've already got started, and you're going to hear from a guy that is just like you today. And we are super stoked to have him with us. So Dion, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me here. I'm super excited about this. I can't say thanks enough for what you guys do. Your podcast makes me feel like I get to sit down and talk with a broker or an agent or a CPA every week for an hour, and I don't have to pay for it. It's great.
Hey, that's good to know. That's a good review right there of the truth. And how I came across Dion is I was looking for something. I don't know what it was, and his name kept popping up on Bigger Pockets. And I thought, you know what? I read a bunch of stuff that all his comments and things like this, and I thought, this guy is just a straight shooter, normal guy, and having success with a strategy that pretty much all of you can do. And I just like the simplicity, the cleanness, and the straightforwardness of how he was communicating with people. So I thought, hey, let's share Dion with the Seattle Investors Club and the nuts and bolts of real estate investing crowd. So here we are. We're going to kick it off today. And so let's do that, Joe. Let's just jump right into it.
Absolutely, Dion. So our first question is that we really like to get to know people that are on our show. So if you could jump back in time and let us know how you grew up, where you grew up, and how that got you into this crazy world of real estate and real estate investing.
So a lot of people say they grew up poor, and I think if we could take that to the extreme, that would be my origin story. I never called us squatters, but we used to, when I was a kid, we would move into houses, fix the doors and windows, and live there until the owner showed up and asked us who we were. In my opinion, growing up, squatters would have stayed and had to be evicted. We would just leave. We would go find a new house. And I joined the Marines to get an easier life. And, they provided housing and benefits and a paycheck. And it was a lot easier than the life I had as a kid. But as an adult, I got really tired of my sources of income being taken away by things outside of my control. After Desert Storm, the Marine Corps downsized and I was pushed out. And then in 2008, when the recession hit, I was a City of Tumwater police officer. And if you guys understand, when recessions hit, police departments shrink and start laying everybody off. Like during a recession, there's no more crime, so we don't need cops anymore. And I just got tired of having to look for new jobs or new careers or changes. I've also been a truck driver. And around 2008, I thought I would, try rental properties. My brother had done it. He had retired. He has 10 paid off properties. He never has to work again in his life. And my first experience with rentals was so bad, I tried to quit. And luckily, around 2011, when I was really trying to quit, the economy was so bad, I was upside down in the house and couldn't get out from under it. And then I found bigger pockets. And it's amazing what a little bit of knowledge will do for you. And it changed my direction and showed me a way that pretty much anybody can get to within 10 years, no matter where they're starting from. Because I was a single parent with 3 kids, about $89,000 in debt, bad debt. And it took about 8 years to get financially free and completely out of bad debt.
That is fantastic. I just got the chills. No joke. I'm sitting here and I just got the chills. Very awesome. We're so honored to have you, on the podcast today. And thank you for your service, not only in the Marines, but as a police officer. And I know we're going to round that out later in the show with some of the cool things that you're able to do today because of the financial freedom that you've been able to achieve for yourself. So let's, this is awesome. So you got sort of introduced to real estate through your brother, watching what your brother was doing. It sounds like. Actually, funny enough, your upbringing, I don't know, when you were talking, I kept thinking of that Steve Martin movie. What was that? Where Steve Martin, what was that movie? Maybe you guys aren't, you know which one?
I think it was The Jerk.
Yeah, The Jerk, right? Yeah. I don't know why I was envisioning that when you were talking.
I identified with that very well.
Good stuff, man. Well, you, that is good. So, it sounds like, really how you grew up, you were sort of in a weird sort of way, not house hacking or any of that stuff, but you were, fixing the windows and the doors to stay in these houses in that period of your life. That is just interesting to me. And then your brother, how did your brother get started? I assume he was there growing up with you in the same situation.
He was. My brother's very entrepreneurial. He ran a tree service. That's really what my family does. My dad and my 2 brothers ran tree services. That's why the Marine Corps was easier. My brother would buy mobile homes on acreage that were falling apart, and he is incredibly handy. He would turn that place into an amazing looking house. He would buy it for $50,000, put 30 or 40,000 in his own sweat equity into it, and turn it into a rental. So he had a completely paid off rental. And then once he got to 10, he closed down his tree service and never has to work again. So he spends his life traveling to Thailand, Colombia, Vegas, and it
Nice.
kind of the idea that I should look into this just for financial freedom. And his model wouldn't work for me because I'm like a lot of the listeners. I have a job. I have to, 40 to 60 hours a week working somewhere. I can't go and completely renovate a place. So being a single parent, I wasn't sure if I could handle being a landlord and working and raising kids. And so I tried to test out the waters by moving from my house, which I had kept through the divorce. I moved into an apartment and rented out the house. And my first experience was really bad because I rented to a friend and I made every mistake that you could possibly think of. There was no contract, no lease. It was a handshake. And later, once I figured out bigger pockets and got a good tenant in there, I realized I could handle this. And I wanted to buy more single family houses around here in Washington. I figured I would live in each one for a year and then, get owner occupied loans, 30 years, fixed rate interest, low interest rate, turn it into another rental like my house. But the housing market here is too expensive for me to find a house that I could cash flow on.
Well, let's back it up for a second because this is all good stuff. I'm going to back you up for a second. So how you ended up with your first rental is that you had your primary residence. Sounds like you unfortunately went through a divorce, but you ended up with your primary residence and you decided to keep it and just move to an apartment and rent it out, right? So you had owner occupancy financing on that from the start. And do you still own that house today?
I do. It's actually paid off. And I
Perfect.
have a Section 8 tenant in there right now. That's a great tenant. And I get a good rent for it. House is really nice. I'm really happy I kept the place.
Well, let's talk about what happened. So what did that first experience look like? We're going to really, we're the nuts and bolts. We're like deep dive people here.
Fair enough. So I rented to a friend who was also a single parent. So when he started to become late on rent, I kind of understood coming from, a similar position. And late became later and then became never. So in the first year, I probably collected 4 or 5 months worth of rent. And when I finally went to the house to have a face-to-face talk, I realized he didn't live there. He had moved out and moved someone else in, and he was collecting rent from her and keeping it.
Oh, God.
And he had started projects, put in half a wall, and the house was, the roof was bad. And I tried to give up. I literally tried to give the house away, thinking that, while I was working and being a single parent, there was no way I could handle being a landlord, because I didn't realize how easy life could be if you have systems in place. And I'll get there in the future, but 2019, I spent about 20 hours total self-managing 11 units. But in that first year, I felt like it was 20 hours a week to manage one tenant.
Right. Exactly. So you got him out of there, or somehow, how'd you resolve that situation?
I found another single parent who I tried to give the house to, and she could keep custody if she stayed in the same school district. So it was beneficial to her. I felt like I was helping somebody out, which is always my goal, is if you can help, the more people you help, the better your life will be. And
Yes.
so I tried to just give it to her on assume the mortgage situation. But she had bad credit, and she found a lender that said if she made 12 payments, they would then finance the loan and put it in her name. And at about 10 payments, which for me was great because it was the first time anybody else had been making the payments, she lost a job. And her other job was a bartender, where she made enough money, but apparently didn't claim the tips, so no longer had the credit with the lender. So we tried for another year. So for 2 years, I tried to give the house away and couldn't. And then finally, she inherited a house and moved out. She's the only actual turnover I've had since I got my systems in place. And at that point, I had been listening to Bigger Pockets. I heard of an investor who invests in Section 8 housing. I thought, well, this is a nice house in a nice neighborhood. I'll call Section 8 and see what they'll pay. And instead of making the payment, they were going, which was $1,088, they would pay $1,800 a month, which I couldn't believe, because to me, it was a house I'd been trying to give away, and all of a sudden it was going to start making me money. And now in that house, there is a single mother on disability who has 4 kids. One has special needs, and they get to grow up in a community that has basketball courts and volleyball courts and a private lake access and a boat launch. And
Oh my God, that's
so they get to be in a cool place that they probably couldn't afford otherwise. And I get a house.
And
I
this
like.
is through Section 8.
Correct. Yes. In Thurston County. It's out on
Excellent.
Lake Lawrence and Yum.
Nice. Great story. Good story. Well, that brings me to an interesting thing. And thanks for being a good guy, by the way. I want to start the discussion a little backwards from how most investors do. And you kind of hit on it because you were talking about your tenants getting qualified for their loan and things like this. But, I think a lot of investors talk about like how to, underwrite a property, how to buy a property, how to run the numbers, how to value add to it, how to flip it, how to whatever. And the last thing everybody talks about, which is the number one thing they should be talking about, is understanding financing, debt. Because so I want to reverse engineer into the discussion a little bit. I think investors, if you're getting started here, that to help yourselves, the number one thing you should learn about in the beginning is debt, how to finance properties, and understanding how debt in regards to real estate investing, because that will help you and launch you to grow your portfolio faster than trying to just learn it along the way, right? So let's talk about how did you purchase you have that property that was your own owner-occupied property from your divorce, but on property number 2, how did you finance it, and how did debt play into that, or what's the deal there?
Well, the real game changer for me was when some interview on Bigger Pockets around 2012 pointed out that a small multifamily and large multifamily are different categories. So 4 units or less, or 5 units or more. With 4 units or less, you qualify for almost exactly the same lending options as a single family house. So you can do low money down, fixed interest rate, 30-year. There's no balloon payment. There's no commercial loans. It's based on your credit score. You can do all the way down to a 3.5% FHA loan. I did on my first duplex a 5% conventional, which right now with the pandemic going on, most lenders are requiring 20% or 25%, depending on where you're at. But in 2012, with a 5% down loan, I had scraped and saved. I was working as a truck driver and as an instructor at a trucking school where I had taken a big pay cut after 2008. So I wasn't able to save very much money. And like I said, single parent, 1 income, 3 kids. I found a duplex, and moving into it from the apartment, my housing expenses were $1,500 a month. And when I moved into the duplex, the other side was rented out. And after PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and setting aside for repairs and vacancy, my cost for the duplex was about $300 a month, which increased my savings rate by $1,200 a month.
Nice.
So just being willing to live next to somebody, which was no different than living in the apartment, except now I get to pick the neighbors, vastly increased my savings rate.
Let's back it up for 1 second then. So you sort of accidentally fell into number 1, which many, many, many investors do, right? Number 2, you were actually seeking out. You made a plan to do this. This was your goal. What were your initial goals when you said, okay, I'm going to go do this? Was it simply just to have your living costs covered?
Yes. The original goal was to get to financial independence, which is reaching the freedom number. So not replacing the full W-2 income, but how much does it cost to live every year? Can I make that much through rental profit? That was my first goal. And the first duplex didn't do that. And a lot of people think that, the first one needs to be a home run. And that's not the case for, I think, anybody that I've talked to. The first one starts the process.
Right. Let's talk about why the first one doesn't accomplish that goal. I think that's a good deep dive. Typically, the first one doesn't.
Yeah. So for me, the biggest change was almost every financial topic you can look up online says to eliminate coffee or drinking or eating out or taking nice vacations. And all of those are, 5 to 20% of your expenses. The biggest expense for almost everyone in the United States, at least, is housing. And so my thought process was if I can eliminate housing, because when I grew up, like I said, we would move into houses and couldn't, we weren't rich enough to afford to pay rent, which is hard for anyone to understand. But I used to go to friends' houses when I was a kid, and I would listen to their parents talk, and they would talk about paying rent. And I remember thinking my friends were so much richer than me because they could afford to pay rent. So right now, with 11 units, all of my tenants, in my mind, are richer than I am because they can somehow afford to pay rent. And I'm living in one of my units in my fourplex being paid $1,700 a month to live here. So
nice.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about though. So, but that people need to understand, you don't have to accomplish the full goal on your, you just need to get started with a smart investment to lower your living expenses and not try and, cover everything in your life with one great deal, which are so hard to find. Right.
Right. I was only able to find a decent deal. None of my deals were even good. Not one property I've purchased has met the 1% rule. Instead, I use a different metrics. I'm looking for a 10% cash on cash return, which I didn't understand in the beginning. My first thought was, if I can put money into a property and it gets me some money back, the more money I put into a property, the more money I'll get back. There wasn't even any math involved. And for a long time, I did not ever think I would invest in property because my brother kept saying, I buy a property and in 11 years, I've made my money back. And that stopped me in my tracks for probably a decade until I realized he still had his money. it was just sitting in a property instead of sitting in the bank. In the bank, you're getting 0.02% interest, and in a property, you're getting 10% or more. You're getting principal pay down. You're getting appreciation on 4 times what you spent. You're getting tax benefits to pay basically nothing in taxes on the money that you're making. And that was the mental shift for me when I realized I still had the money. Every down payment I've made is still sitting there. It's still my money. It's just in this property that I'm in and instead of the bank.
Well, let's talk about how you underwrite, because that is a big thing here, especially in the Pacific Northwest. People listen to all this stuff like the 1% rule. And, in our area here, we were just talking about it on our weekly meetup, that one of the only ways to make a rental property in this area work is you have to force the rental value by doing something creative like an ADU or, boarding room style of rental or adult family home or whatever. So it's refreshing to meet somebody that says, I'm still investing. Tell us how you do your underwriting, or what like you said, that you want a 10% cash on cash return. And for those listening, just go over what that is compared to what everybody talks about as the 1% rule. Because I think there's a lot of people, you just hit on something really huge, that are just like, what? It took 11 years. What does he mean 11 years? I'm not going to have any money, or, that misconception, that myth. That was a really good explanation that you did, where you were saying, it's not just that my money's not in the bank, it's in these properties, and that's okay. I think people feel like so much pressure that they have to do totally get all the cash out of their properties, right? To make them great properties or something like that. Just tell us how you underwrite your deals again, and how that compares to the 1% rule, and why you're happy anyway.
Sure. So the 1% rule is, and I'll probably get it wrong because I haven't been able to meet it, so I haven't memorized it. The monthly rent is equal to 1% of the total value of the property.
Of what you're all into it for.
Your total is it what you're all into it for, or what the total price is, even including the mortgage?
Yes. So I think like if you're all in at $500,000, you need to get $5,000 a month in rent. Yeah.
Correct. And so here in Washington, when I first started, I was finding single family houses for $350,000 that would rent for $1,800. But I found a duplex for $300,000 that rents out for $2,600. So it wasn't quite the 1% rule, but it was a lot better than a single family house was working for me.
Right.
And so the duplexes that I've bought, that I do at 20% down, if they're $300,000, which is about what I've paid for each one. So one was $290, $298, $300, $60,000.
You primarily all invest in duplexes, is that correct?
I've got 3, and then my last purchase was a 4-plex, and I'm currently hunting for the next 4-plex. Once I realized so each duplex has a cash on cash return of about 10%. So the total cost to purchase, so down payment, closing costs, and immediate repairs, compared to the profit in rent for the year. So I take the annual profit and divide it by the total cost to acquire. That gives you a percentage, and as long as it's 10% or higher, that tells me to take a look at the deal. Because there's still deals I wouldn't get if it met my math numbers, because I prefer to have side-by-side units, so you don't have a tenant above or below another. I like each unit to have at least 2 bedrooms, each unit to have a garage, washer and dryer hookups in the unit. With those specific criteria, I've had 1 turnover in my entire time being the landlord after my friend that I rented to, and that was because she had inherited that house.
Right.
So the math tells you it's a good deal to look at. Then you take a deeper dive, and that's when you look at, making sure that, for me, I want the properties at least 10 miles apart so they don't have the same sources of tenants. I like them to be close to 2 or more economic drivers, like a base, a port, a college, a hospital, 100,000 population or more. So the math is the starting point. And everybody focuses on that, but there's more things to learn as you go. And I didn't know any of this when I was starting out, which is why, again, what you guys are doing here with the show is so important to the people out there that are going to be doing this, because this is information that I wish somebody had told me 10 years ago, and I could have probably been 5 years ahead of where I was.
Right. So these days you're financing your properties how? You put 3.5% down on your first one?
And then since then, it's been 20 or 25% with the increased savings rate and no housing cost. Currently, 100% of W-2 income, which I have a job I absolutely love, so I don't see myself quitting it. And about 50% of rental profits are saved for the next deal. So getting that 20 or 25% gets easier. Between the first duplex and the second one was almost 3 years, then 2 years, and then 1.5 years. And now it's about a year between each purchase because people always talk about the debt snowball, using Dave Ramsey's debt snowball to get rid of debt. It's a reverse of that. It's an income snowball. Each new rental that cash flows adds to your ability to save for the next one, as long as you don't do things like buy a boat or a big house for yourself to live in until you have the assets pay for that house.
But let me ask you, having your W-2, if you did not have your W-2 on these first several purchases, would you have been able to get the loans?
Nope. That's another thing that is really important. A lot of times I hear people saying,
this is so important. Yeah.
A lot of people say, I want to invest in real estate with low or no money down. And I want to quit my job because I want to invest in real estate. And that's almost backwards. You need the W-2 or provable income for 2 years to qualify for most loans. And I'm changing my strategy for the loans currently this year because of interest rates being so low. My original strategy was 4 mortgages would be my limit. And large lenders like Wells Fargo, Bank of America will generally limit a person to 4 mortgages. And then there's other lenders like Fairway and Guild Mortgage that'll go up to 10. But I figured I'm not that smart. I'm not that mathematical. People who run banks have this huge mountain of data that shows 4 mortgages is safe. That's the least amount of risk for somebody being foreclosed on. So I chose their metric and I said, that's a limit. So I got to 4 mortgages and then I focused and paid one off. And then I added another one and then I was going to focus and pay one off and just always stay at 4 mortgages. That way I'm benefiting from leverage, but I'm not over leveraged. And every mortgage that gets paid off widens the gap between rental income and mortgage expenses. But then this year, mortgage rates, federal interest rates dropped to 0. So mortgage rates were down. I just refinanced 2 mortgages, no cash out or anything, but they were at 5.5% interest. And I dropped them down to 3.49% interest.
Why didn't you take any cash out?
What's that?
Why did you do no cash out?
My goal is to never pull any money out of the properties. I want to put money into the properties so that money is working for me. If I pull cash out, that's increasing the debt, which would lower the cash flow. But the actual goal of the refinances was property taxes in Pierce County and Thurston County went up, it seems like about 20%. And with the refinances, my payment went down even with the tax increase. So I was able to get a hold of all of my tenants and say, even with the tax increase this year, we're not going to have to do a rent increase. So the goal was to keep the tenants where they were so that they don't have to spend more money, especially in a year where there's a pandemic going on. But so now with the interest rates so low, I am probably going to add a 5th or a 6th mortgage if I can find the deals, because the deal determines whether you buy a property or not. And before I wasn't going to do that.
Right. Interesting, right? You always have to be able to pivot as a real estate investor. Hey guys, it's Julie here with a quick break from the show to discuss an opportunity some of you may have interest in, which is to work more closely with me. On almost a daily basis, I get calls from investors and brokers, both new and experienced, asking me for guidance or advice. I love helping you guys out and it keeps me on my toes too. So with that said, I wanted to let you know that I have a private broker coaching community called the VIP Education Community. And the best part is that it's 100% free. That's right, it's free to join. So Whether you're a traditional broker or a broker investor, my VIP education community offers personalized one-on-one coaching from not just me, but also from my experienced broker friends with expertise in all disciplines of real estate and real estate investing. We'll teach and share our modern marketing strategies, our tech and lead generation resources, plus teach you how to identify or offer up opportunities for yourself or for your clients using techniques such as seller financing, lease options, land entitlement deals, BRRRR investing, flipping, multifamily or commercial coaching, whatever you like. We've got it all covered for you. The future of real estate is changing fast, and to stay in the game, it's time to learn about all the options you can offer your buyer and seller clients, as well as, if you want, learn how to use those skills to grow your own real estate portfolio. If you'd like more details about joining my VIP education community, reach out to me at julie@seattleinvestorsclub.com or text me at 206-910-2985 or just send me a Facebook message. My new favorite phrase is community equals confidence. So let's navigate the future of real estate together. Now, back to the show. Those are all such good information right there, Dion. This is so great for people today. So relatable. Let me ask you, what do you say, how many years has this been now for you?
My first duplex was around 2012.
Okay.
So I'm just now hitting 8 years.
Okay. And what do you think is the biggest lesson that you wish you knew getting started that you know now, or the biggest mistake that happened that taught you how to move forward more successfully?
So the thing I would tell myself, if I could go back and talk to me when I was starting out, is something that I say to almost anyone that I'm trying to help reach financial independence. And that is, you're going to be alive in 5 years. Start investing like it. That is something I should have been doing since I was 20. I mean, I made it to 40 years old without ever having $1,000 in the bank. So, single parents with one income don't have a real good savings rate. But the one thing I've learned is to run it like a business. And I do a lot of self-educating from Bigger Pockets and any of the other podcasts that are out there, from Meet Kevin, Graham Stephan.
Oh my God, you watch Meet Kevin? I watch Meet Kevin. I don't know anybody else that does, but I watch that guy all the time.
His Bigger Pockets interview was great, and it actually gave me a concept that it seemed like he realized in the middle of the show. Like, he stopped and took a note because he had a thought. And it's, in the beginning, almost all of us investors start out focusing on cash flow. My fear was my W-2 could be taken away at any time, so I need income coming in that I have control over. But cash flow doesn't make you rich. It protects your asset that will make you rich. So in 8 years, I've spent $380,000. And now my profit every year, after principal, interest, taxes, insurance, setting aside 10% for repairs and 5% for vacancy, I make $65,400 a year to live on with no housing expenses. So I'm wealthy as far as my mind goes, because I can afford to live even if I didn't have to work. But my properties have appreciated, and the principal pay down has happened, and my portfolio is worth over $2.2 million. I have about $1 million worth of leverage. So my $380,000 turned into over $1 million if I sold everything and walked away. So yes, cash flow is the focus when we start, but real wealth that my kids will inherit will be in the millions without even thinking about it. And what's really funny to me is my system works for me because, and I can't stress this enough, I'm lazy. I am probably the laziest person I've ever met in my life. Flipping is like a job, and there's a bunch of work, and wholesaling takes a lot of work to find the deal. But I have to live somewhere. So if every 2 to 3 years, I'm just willing to pay 2 guys in a truck $300 to move my stuff, my wealth increases exponentially, and it takes almost no effort. That's probably why it's working for me.
But what about the people that it's unrealistic for them to move every Now, why? Let's just say, let's go back up for a second. Why are you moving every couple years, and what's the benefit of your plan there?
So it's not really required if you can save the down payments. If you
and being like 25%.
Yeah, 25% for an investment property, but currently it's 20% for an owner-occupied small multifamily, unless you go FHA. So conventional loans that I've been able to find, I've heard of 15% down, but the ones I've found are 20%.
So you're only going to go FHA once.
Correct, right. So you only have that one. So I've got a VA loan in my back pocket. I'm not ever going to use my, well, that's not true. I keep my VA loan in my back pocket because at some point in the future, I might have no money saved up for a down payment and find the best deal ever. And then I will be able to move on it. Right. So all of my purchases have been able to happen because I saved the down payment. And the reason I move is because it gets you a lower interest rate, which helps you increase cash flow and increases the amount you can purchase. There's got to be more reasons than that. Maybe I'm just used to
it. Because, some people out there, it's unrealistic for them. Now, I totally get it in the beginning, right? To get that owner occupied, FHA type of conventional type financing, right? But that's another thing I always find on these podcasts is that, about house hacking and live-in flips and all that other stuff is that's unrealistic for a huge portion of people that
there's other versions of house hacking too. For instance, when I went through the police academy, that's up in Bury, and I lived out in Yelm, and it's a 6-month program. I basically house hacked my way through the police academy by renting out a room to a young couple so that I had live-in daycare. They lived there for free, and I never had to worry about my kids being alone. And so maybe if I didn't need daycare, but I had charged them rent, I could have lowered my mortgage payment to increase my savings rate by renting out a room. So house hacking doesn't always involve moving. It's just any way that you reduce what you're spending on your largest expense, which is your housing costs.
Excellent. Good stuff. So how do you find your deals? Are you buying from wholesalers? You find them on your own? You buying off the MLS?
Every single deal I've gotten so far is off the MLS. And I know a lot of agents who would probably never work with me because I have a standing deal with any real estate agent that I meet that if they find a deal and it's one I buy, I will work with them. So currently I have 3 real estate agents. One is retiring or retired, I guess. But they have auto searches set up. And I give each one the exact same criteria, like a copy and pasted email with my criteria. Each one finds completely different deals. So I don't know how the MLS works, but they each use it differently. And so whoever sends the deal that I find that makes the offer is the agent that I work with for that. So I don't sign a buyer's commitment letter. Right. I pretty much treat every person that I work with the same. If it's a contractor, I say, hey, you're a great contractor. I like working with you, but I'm going to get 3 estimates and I'm going to show all of you all 3 estimates. When I get lending, I go to Wells Fargo, Fairway, and Guild Mortgage. And I show them the offers in writing of the competition. And for every initial mortgage so far, Wells Fargo was able to beat the competition. On my last 2 refinances, Fairway was able to beat the competition. And I'm completely transparent, never waste anybody's time, never tell them that they're the only person I'm working with. I say, I get 3 quotes on a $5,000 shed I'm going to have built. I'm definitely getting 3 quotes on a 30-year commitment to a mortgage. Right. And so far, no one I've worked with has had a problem.
Now, are you finding that there's competition on these? And how does that work with inspections, right?
There is competition. And so on my last purchase, I did $50,000 earnest money to show the seller I was motivated to buy this 4-plex. To me, that was completely safe. I have an inspection clause to get out if I don't like what I find when I do the walkthrough, because I hadn't even been to the property yet. I make my offers before I've seen them. And then I've got a lot of just so everybody knows, a lot of the small properties, the smaller multifamily properties, they won't even allow you to tour the property unless you have a mutual contract because Correct. They don't want to disturb the tenant. So that's normal on multifamily, right? Yep. And especially with the way the market has been here in Washington these last few years, most duplexes that get put up for sale have 10 plus offers within 24 hours. And so you have to, I've done escalation clauses. I don't like to do those. And if anybody hasn't heard of that before, it's where you offer a set amount like $300,000 and the agents know that you're willing to go up to $325,000 if somebody else bids higher than you, and it'll go up in increments of $1,000 or $5,000 or whatever the clause is written as. My fear with that is I don't know the selling agent, and they might just tell the seller, hey, I've got an offer of $325. Let's go with that.
Actually, it doesn't work that way because the escalation clause addendum requires that the seller or the listing agent provide proof that they have another offer. So they actually have to show you the competing offer that kicks in your escalator. So that's actually not, unless they have some dummy offer written up, which.
Well, this is why I'm listening to your show. So I'm the guy who's still learning and love to share what we've figured out so far. So that's
we're all learning from you too. It's all yin and yang here with the nuts and bolts of real estate investing. It's all super great stuff. So basically what we're saying though, everybody, is that you on these multifamily properties, you might be worried about competition and that you had, pre-inspection, and you really have a chance to inspect on these just because of the nature of how these deals go down. Now, on a single family, it might be different. You might not be competitive if you make an offer with an inspection. So you might need to pre-inspect, which is common on single family type properties. The reason why it's not on multifamily is because many times there are tenants living there and they don't want to disturb them, and they don't want to give them a heads up that they're selling for fear that they might move out or something like that. So just a tidbit, some of the myth busters will say that are out there. Let's talk for a second about credit scores. Did you in the beginning how did you manage your credit score, or do you have any advice for listeners about credit score?
Yeah, credit score is really important. I can't stress it enough. I hear in all the forums, and I'm always in as many forums as I can, trying to find people who have questions that I can actually answer. So this is one that comes up a lot. And I see a lot of landlords who say they want 3 times the amount of income for a tenant, and they're really looking at backgrounds, and none of that matters to me. When I'm looking at a tenant, their credit score, and the only other criteria is no evictions ever. If somebody had an eviction 30 years ago, I still wouldn't put them in as a tenant. They know how the system works and they'll use it to their advantage, and that's just not something I want to deal with. I require a 700 or higher credit score. And my opinion is somebody who's taken the time to fix their credit to that level is going to care. In doing that, I've never had one late or missing payment ever. Even my Section 8 tenants, there's a ton of Section 8 tenants, and everybody has a misconception about that. And they think low income. And instead, Section 8 is fixed income. I've got retired vets. I've got people on disability. They have 800 plus credit scores on the Section 8 housing program. And they make great tenants.
Awesome.
Myself, when I was starting out, I fought really hard to have a high credit score. That's why I know it's important to a lot of people. And I hate to bring anything negative into an interview, but when I went through my divorce, I found out about literally hundreds of thousands of debt in my name that I didn't know about. My ex had credit cards and loans in my name and had run everything to a post office box. And when we divorced, she filed for bankruptcy. So all debt became my debt. And I was calling the lenders to figure out, first of all, how do I pay these debts? Because I'd never heard of them before. And luckily, one of the lenders said something, and it triggered the thought in my head. He said, well, she filed bankruptcy. Do you plan on filing bankruptcy? Because if you're going to do that, before you do that, we'd offer for you to pay 20% of the value. And it was a credit card for about $8,000. And I thought, that sounds really good. So I called all of the lenders, got the debt reduced to $89,000. So I had to take care of $89,000 in bad debt that I didn't know existed, while keeping a good credit score, while figuring out how to buy the next place. And for most lenders, they want a 620 credit score. And I wanted that 740, because at 740 or higher, you basically get the best interest rate that I know of for any loan, 4 units or less. And
that is so good info. Do you know how many people are out there identifying with you right now that probably are embarrassed to have these conversations with, their mentors or whatever. And, I know Dion is, I'm sure, available to talk to all you guys. I know I'm available to talk to you guys if you feel like this is resonating with you, right? And, also, Joe, maybe in the show notes today, you can drop our first podcast with who's our credit guy? I'm drawing a blank right now. Joseph Kibworth and Associates. Really awesome, kick-ass podcast we did on how to build your credit if you're having any issues with Joseph Kibworth from the Kibworth Group. Joe, the first one we did would be if you want to drop that down there as well. But we also, if you guys ever need help, if any of you are in a situation where you have deciding whether you should go with, file for bankruptcy or not. I have a wonderful attorney, Richard Symes, who's also a broker on my team. And he is an expert not only at, he's a bankruptcy foreclosure attorney, a broker, investor, and I'd be happy to connect you guys with him. In fact, we actually did a podcast with him on foreclosures, but more so what I want to point out is the bankruptcy part. If you guys need a referral for that, for yourself or for any of your clients or for any of the sellers, maybe sometimes that you're trying to pick up a deal off of, reach out to me. You can always hit me up at 206-910-2985. Just text me and I'll connect you with Richard and basically my entire Rolodex for whatever you need. So this is such good information that I think resonates with people. So how do you, switching gears a little bit, we talked about keeping your job to protect your borrowing power going forward, right? But the reality is that as long as you can come up with a down payment on these on these properties, the 25% we'll say, then technically the property can carry itself, right? You have a chance of that.
You can, and from what I know, now I'm not a lender or a broker, and this, correct me if I'm wrong. Once rental income is on your W-2, your taxes at the end of the year for 2 years, then rental income can count in your debt to income ratio. Once you have more than 2 years, I have a lender who will recognize projected future rents in the property I'm purchasing based on leases that are in place. So it's one of the reasons why I prefer to purchase already occupied properties, because it makes lending a little easier if there's leases in place. And then I actually have a really powerful tool that I've used to get even longer leases with tenants and to have the tenants themselves ask for rent increases. And it's worked almost every time. And
that sounds like something we all need to know about.
So I call it the binder. And most people who rent a property have never been included in the decision-making process for the price of their housing before in their life. Or if they have, it was a bad experience. And so what I do is I make a binder, and the first page is a picture of the property that I purchased with the purchase price. And I've had people tell me, I don't want my tenants to know. Well, do all of the tenants in the world not know about Redfin or Trulia or apartments.com and can see your purchase price a week after you buy it? So the purchase price, and then the next page is a map with all of the rentals in the area that are of a similar number of bedrooms, garage, basic amenities are about the same. And then each page after that is those rentals and their price. And so most properties that are for sale if it's small multifamily, because the owner is tired of being an owner and they haven't fixed anything for a while and they haven't raised rents because they don't want to deal with turnover. So the tenants have kind of felt neglected and they know they've been getting a really good rate. So when I purchased a duplex and I go to the tenant and I show them the binder and I say, you're paying $900 a month. All of the other 2-bedroom units around here that have a garage are going for $1,400 to $1,500 because that's what the BAH is near this base. What do you think would be fair? No tenant has ever been asked, what do you want to pay for rent? They're not going to say $1,400 to $1,500. That's a $600 jump. That scares them all. But I've had almost every tenant go, $1,250 or $1,300. How does that sound to you? And then I go, $1,250 sounds great. Why don't we do a 2-year lease so I can't raise your rent? And now I've got the property at the purchase price I want. The tenant feels like they're getting a deal because they're a couple $100 lower than the area average. I've got the rents up where I need them to be. My lender sees a long lease with a good amount of rent so that I've got my debt to income ratio worked out. And again, I've had no turnover other than the one person who inherited the house.
Well, and if you ever had to sell it, you got upside in your rents too to help market your property. I mean, not that you would ever sell it, but that is actually interesting because that is the reverse psychology of most people. They're like, let me max out that rent because that rent increases, I guess on conventional, it's not as much about your NOI. It's about your sales comps, right? You're still in a conventional loan. I mean, it is NOI, but you're leaving money on the table there. If you're the type of person that wants to pull cash out refinances and move forward with your properties, that is interesting. That is a very unique play on that. I understand why you're doing that. That is, again, summarize why you're doing that. Like, what's your goal with doing that? To keep a long-term tenant in place to show your
The long-term goal is me realizing that thing I said earlier about you're going to be alive in 5 years, start investing like it. When I buy a property at the projected rents I'm expecting, which are below the area average, I'm going to get at least my 10% cash on cash return, which is my goal. So every $100,000 I can get into property anywhere, I'm going to make $10,000 a year every year for the rest of my life. So how many $100,000 do you need to spend to be completely financially free? But in 5 years, there's principal pay down. I just refinanced 2 mortgages to bring the payment down. Rents will go up at the end of that 2-year period and maybe at the 4-year period. Maybe you do 1-year leases and you do a 3 or a 5% increase every year. Not every tenant wants a 2-year lease. So in 5 years, this is going to be a 20% cash on cash return property that has appreciated and has had principal pay down. And I've paid no taxes because of depreciation and write-offs. And I have the option of a 1031 exchange. And with the stepped up tax plan, my kids aren't even going to pay taxes on this income. So that's my goal is 5 years from now. How will this deal look then?
Excellent. Oh man, this is a good one today, Dion. We appreciate you so much. We are going to run long on time here. We could talk to you forever. I guess what? I think we're going to have you come back on.
I would love to.
We're going to do this on another day and continue the conversation with Dion. As you can see, guys and gals listening, Dion is very relatable. This is so doable by you guys, and busting some of the myths or hearing his story, I hope has resonated with you today. I'm sure that Dion would be willing to have conversations with you guys to help you out as well. And actually, Dion, I'm going to twist your arm to join us on one of our Thursday meetups. Although I don't know, you're at your day job, so maybe that's not doable on an 11:30 to 12:30 on a Thursday.
I'm definitely going to be able to make it.
Okay, perfect. And if you guys want to meet Dion and see his face and be able to ask him questions, pop in. It's not going to be every week, but check in and jump in on our weekly meetup that happens every Thursday Pacific time here from 11:30 to 12:30. All you have to do is go to meetup.com and search for Seattle Investors Club and grab the access link to a Zoom meetup. That happens every week where we just basically free form. Anybody asks any questions, they get help with whatever they need help with. People bring their deals to sell. We have lenders, property managers, investors, you name it. You've heard me say it before. So, Dion, what has all this done for you in your life? What has this allowed you the freedom to do, which is blowing your mind, and you get to focus on your passion? Let's talk about you for a minute and what you're doing.
Well, the funny thing is, it started out as a very selfish, self-centered idea. What can I do to not need to work for money? And in around 2012, when I found Bigger Pockets and I found what I call a path to financial freedom, I had just started to look at buying a duplex, but I had an idea of how many rentals it would take to not need to work. The truck driving school that I was working at, where I had taken a big pay cut to work there, but I really wanted to be an instructor. I could take all my years of driving and I can put it in somebody's hands. I could physically give away a career every day that I go to work. So even though I've been a cop, and a Marine and a truck driver. Working at the truck driving school is the coolest job I've ever had. But the school sold and some new owners came in, and they had never worked in transportation, and they come in and they improve businesses and they make the employees happy, and then the businesses perform better. And I had an idea, and I never would have even brought it up if I needed the job. If I really needed the job, I would have probably just kept doing my job and kept my head down. But since I was on my way to financial freedom, the new owners came in, and I told them I have an idea, and this idea would help the school grow. And I explained it to them, and they were really cool. They said, we just met you. We don't know you, but I'll tell you what, your idea sounds good. Why don't you do it? And if it's successful, in 6 months, we'll keep you working here. And if it's not successful, you're fired and someone else will work here. And that was the best chance I've ever been given in my entire life. My idea was, truck driving schools the whole industry kind of sucks. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to go through a truck driving school, get your CDL, and drive over the road for a company like Swift or CR England and be paid by the mile and be gone all the time. And the lifestyle is not that good and you don't make that much money. I'm a single parent. In all my years of driving, I've never spent a night away from home. And I figured our clients wanted to do the same thing. And in Washington State, there's over 6,000 registered transportation companies. All of these companies have HR, IT, operations, sales, customer service, driver, mechanic, web design. Every position you can imagine exists in transportation. And whenever there's a job opening, nobody applies for it. So my idea was to found a nonprofit that does job placement assistance for free. It's a 501c3 company, so we don't charge a penny. It's called TPS, Transportation Placement Services. So for free, anybody can come into one of our truck driving school locations. We're in Auburn, Port Orchard, Lakewood, and Olympia. And for free, we will pair them up with jobs in transportation, not driving a truck. So the people who work in the office or the warehouse that make it possible for the truck to be on the road. Because there's a driver shortage going on, and these transportation companies are struggling to find drivers. They're hurting so bad, they're actually taking their current staff, like their forklift driver or their IT specialist, or Oak Harbor Freight Line sent through a terminal manager one time to get their CDL to be trained to become a driver, and then they get promoted to become a driver, which leaves their position vacant. So for free, I literally get to train people how to drive a truck in the school, but then I get to help people find jobs who are never going to spend a penny with us. And it was really weird. What this did is it helped our school develop relationships with local trucking companies. So our graduates at commercial driver school don't have to get in a truck and drive all over the country. They actually go through the school. They get jobs with companies like Old Dominion, Oak Harbor Freight Lines, McLean, Redaway, Clean Harbors, all of these local companies that pay $70,000, $80,000 a year to start, the drivers in their own bed every night. And
God,
I was only able to take the risk because if I lost my job, I still had a path to financial freedom. And it panned out so well. It worked so good that our school grew from one campus with 6 staff to 4 campuses with 60 staff. And we're continuing to grow, looking at other states now. The owners were so, I don't want to say shocked, but impressed at the stable growth that they made me the president of the company and gave me part ownership.
Jesus Christ, you guys. I swear, I think this is probably my favorite podcast that we've done in quite a while, Dion. It's so, congratulations, to you for just being you. I mean, it probably helps that you are a nice guy helping people and you got a little bit of that, law of attraction, good aura around you as well. Right? Do right by people, guys, as part of the equation, not just all the money stuff as well. That is fantastic, Dion. How can people, how do people get in touch with you about the trucking job stuff?
Okay, so the phone number, and it'll confuse you a little bit because it'll be answered by somebody who says, commercial driver school, how can I help you? But it's the nonprofit. And you just say that you're looking to talk to a placement specialist. That's our code word that says you don't want to drive a truck. The phone number is 253-983-0200 or cdstruckschool.com for any one of our locations. You can come in Monday through Friday between 8 and 5. You don't need an appointment. We always have a placement specialist staffed that works specifically with employers looking for people. So it's funny, if any of your listeners come in and we help them find a job for free, they're doing us a favor, because that's how we keep our relationships up with these local trucking companies.
God, Dion, my mind is racing on how cool this could be, where you're providing jobs for people who can basically be just like you with a W-2 and buy these rental properties, and all these people that you're placing in jobs, you're at the same, I'm like getting teary here. You teach them how to do this.
And what's the best part for me is formats like what you are doing.
I'm teary, man.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but I have this math equation on how pretty much anybody in 10 years with a small multifamily in a couple of years can make it to where work is optional. And nobody can hear a word of it until they're ready. And generally, the people listening to a podcast like this or reaching out to you are the ones who are ready. So I appreciate the chance to come on here and share what I've figured out so far.
Dang it, guys. This is good stuff today. Woo, threw me off there for a second. Getting hit my P's and Q's back about me here. So as you can see, guys, Dion, or you can hear, is somebody that you're going to want to get to know. And hopefully you can do that by joining us as well on our weekly meetup, and maybe Dion can pop in there, or you can reach out to him if you're interested in job placement. And man, we appreciate you coming on today. Joe's taking all the notes. Joe is going to be dropping all these details in the show notes as well. I thank you so much again. And I don't know what else to say today, because I think you've said it all so perfectly. So we're going to wrap up today, guys, and we're going to be talking to Dion again and continuously, and we're going to support him. Joe and I are also going to do whatever we can to support him to continue with what he's already started. So, Joe, where can everybody find the details about today's very important podcast?
Yeah, you can get to all the show notes, the links, the phone numbers at seattleinvestorsclub.com/128. That's seattleinvestorsclub.com/128. And again, guys, if you like what we're doing here, we'd love it if you would give us a review on your favorite listening platform.
Good job. Good job, guys. And don't forget, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. And we would love it if you guys would join us on Meetup. It makes it easier for us to communicate with you. If you go to meetup.com, search for Seattle Investors Club. While you are there, grabbing the link for access to our Thursday morning Pacific time meetups. Make sure that you join our meetup group as well. It makes it easier for us to communicate with you. So that's it for today. I am inspired. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling positive. I feel love, joy, and newfound friendship. So thank you for listening, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Seattle Investors Club podcast. If you have questions that you'd like to have answered on the show, shoot us an email at info@seattleinvestorsclub.com. Now go out, take that action, and build that real estate business. Thanks for listening.